Okay, I think we will get started. Um, Good evening. I'm Judy Clark, the Director of Engineering Services for the county, and I want to welcome you to our second public meeting for the Big Coppitt Roads Adaptation Project. We held our first meeting in February to present the project to the community, and we've scheduled this meeting tonight specifically to address questions about the private property easements that are needed for the project. We recently mailed out easement documents to the property owners where we need them. And I wanted to note that notification letters were sent out to specific people, not the entire project area. And I mention that because if there are any people joining us who did not receive a letter, we don't want you to feel left out. We weren't trying to avoid you or anything. They were for a specific reason. Everyone's welcome on the meeting, and we'll answer any questions that you have about the project, not just specifically about easements. As you'll hear tonight during the presentation, we have a deadline of May to submit our design documents to the state and federal agencies to be to be eligible for significant grant funding for the construction phase. The team's been working very hard to meet that deadline, and I realized that things might seem a little rushed. We had our meeting in February, and now 2 months later, we're coming back asking for easements. But I wanted to make sure it's understood that there will be time to hold additional meetings, and we will be holding them to discuss additional aspects of this process as we move through it. And you'll hear some about that tonight. So we have time. We can have additional meetings, meet with people on site if necessary to make people comfortable with the project. This won't be the last time you're hearing from us. We have a brief presentation tonight that gives an overview of the project and then gets into the details of the easements. And for anyone who attended the first meeting, it'll be a bit repetitive, but we want to make sure that everyone has the details, and then we can move into the questions. We have our project team here tonight. We have our lead engineering consultant team and drainage specialist from WSP, Greg Corning, Whistler Pierre-Louis, and Luis Soto. Joining them is subconsultant and roadway specialist from HDR Engineering, Juliana Ortiz. And we have Aaron Deedy from Aaron Deedy PA, who has assisted the county with our policy and regulatory issues related to resilience and adaptation for over 10 years. Joining me from the county are our engineering project manager, Leo Montiel, Rhonda Haig, the county's chief resilience officer, and we have Mayor Michelle Lincoln and County Administrator Christine Hurley. Mayor, I believe you'd like to say a few words before we get started.
Thank you for that, Judy Clark, and good evening, everyone, and happy Earth Day. Welcome back if you were with us for the LAV meeting in Key West. And as Judy said, this evening's meeting is really specifically about the issue of easements. And just as a reminder, all of this information that we're discussing tonight and that we discussed in the past can be found on our website, including the PowerPoint presentation. And I encourage everyone to go to our website and look at it. It's really been helpful even for me to review. So before I turn it over to staff, I just want to, again, thank everyone who's here this evening. And I am pretty sure that we're not all on the same page. I think some of you all are very excited about this prospect. Some of you all are very nervous, and some of you are adamantly against this. And all along this process, there will be opportunities for your neighborhood to weigh in on whether or not you want to continue moving forward or not. A decision has not been made, and the decision will be made by you, the community members who will either see the benefit of this or not. So I just ask that everyone is respectful of each other's thoughts and opinions because you all are neighbors with each other. And the last thing we want is for people to have hurt feelings or feel like they weren't heard. We are always available, either at this meeting or afterwards. All of us, whether you would just want to reach out to me as your county commissioner, or if you want to reach out to a staff just to talk to us more about it, we're all here and we're all available for you. So this is your all's neighborhood, and this is going to be your project if you want it. So with that, I want to turn it back over to staff so they can explain what's going on this evening with easements.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. And our County Administrator, Christine Hurley, you'd like to say a few words, please.
Yes, yes. Good evening, everybody. I really want to recognize this project as being pretty cutting edge. And you probably read in the news or you experience yourselves within your neighborhood times where your roads have standing water. And you know the Keys are facing potential sea level rise where roads could be inundated for long periods of time. Certain neighborhoods in our communities are already having things like that. And our county started to be proactive in how to address these things several years ago. It took us quite a while to develop vulnerability analyses to determine which neighborhoods really might be at risk. And your neighborhood is one of those that was chosen based on that analysis. I think what's most important, and it's already been said, but I'm going to say it again, is that this is going to be voted on by your community. Our county commissioners have made sure that they have told staff, unless the majority of the property owners within these areas want these projects, they do not want to proceed with them. But I do also want to recognize that you have to have forethought and really think about your future. Some of the neighborhoods we know already in the Keys that have longer days of flooding have already started talking to us about their real estate values and the fact that they fear that the value of their homes and their neighborhoods may diminish because people know that those certain neighborhoods have this type of flooding. And so there's many reasons for this. And I think that's something you really have to think about when you make your decision on how you feel about the project. Our road crews periodically come now to your neighborhood and pump water off the roads. And some of you may know that, some of you may not, but Judy and her staff do that periodically throughout the year. We have been very successful in getting large amounts of grant money to do these types of projects. But so far, we've only received funding for 4 neighborhoods. And there are upwards of 50 to 90, depending on what year you're looking at for potential sea level rise, that will eventually need this type of project within the Keys. So being one of the 4 neighborhoods that we're working on is a pretty important benefit to your neighborhood. Finally, and it's not going to be completely covered in this meeting tonight, but there will be a future meeting where the residential neighborhood improvements ordinance that our county has been working on, which is about to be implemented, will set parameters and how the voting will occur and how neighborhoods will get to weigh in on whether projects move to construction. So this is currently in design. We hope you enjoy the presentation and learn from it and really give thoughtful consideration on how this could benefit you and your neighborhood. Thanks for attending.
Thank you, Christine. And now I'll turn it over to Aaron Deedy to begin the presentation.
I think you have to hit the next slide, Whistler. There we go.
So this is our agenda tonight. Judy gave us an overview on why we're here. The intent of this meeting is to really focus in on those people that received notifications from the county that were in need of easements to implement the project. If you attended our meeting back on February 18th, hopefully you're somewhat familiar with the project. If not, we're going to provide an overview tonight so you understand the relationship between the easements and the design of the project and why we actually need them for components of construction. So we'll talk about a little bit about why we are doing the project from a flood risk perspective, why we're fixing the roads, the design approach for this project and what elements are included within that design. Then we're going to talk about the relationship to the private property easements, where they're located, why we need them for the project, and then what's next. As our previous speakers have mentioned, this is not the end of the road. Oh, that's a terrible pun. For this project, you will be hearing from us again in future meetings to provide more information as the design progresses. We'll talk about that in terms of what's next. And then we'll take all of your questions. We'll also be able to pull up maps to verify the location of your property and where it fits within the project footprint. Next slide. So why are we here? In the Keys, we're seeing different types of flooding impact different areas. For this particular area, what we're seeing most pronounced is increased groundwater. And what that is doing as sea level rise increases, it is diminishing the functionality of your existing drainage system. The existing drainage system that you have relies upon gravity collection in swales and to move the water from point A to point B off of the roads. And sometimes what happens is the properties are higher than the road and they're draining towards the road. And if the groundwater levels are increasing, that whole system gets diminished over time. And that's why you will see more events of standing water. We also know that sea levels are increasing over time. We've done a lot of analysis and projections about what that looks like over 2040, 2050, and beyond. We also know that certain times of the year we see higher high tides. That's usually the September, October, November timeframe. If you live closer to the water, you may see that the water is up higher on your seawall or overtakes your dock on in certain months. So we're seeing the confluence of all of those types of flooding events. But here, the main culprit is that increasing groundwater from the sea level rise. So as mentioned, the existing drainage on the roads is becoming less functional. That's going to continue to diminish over time as we see increasing sea levels and increasing seasonal tidal flooding. So the county has been working for years on designing projects to alleviate this flood risk and continue to provide access to homes and businesses for people along the roadway systems. And those projects deal with these realities that we're starting to see. The county has also secured federal and state funding, large amounts of funding for this particular project to pay for the capital cost, the upfront cost of construction of the project. So we want to discuss that with you tonight and what those amounts are and what some of our timelines are associated with the use of those dollars as the project progresses. And then finally, the main focus of the meeting tonight, if you received a package from the county requesting you to review the documentation for a potential easement, we will discuss how those easements fit into the project design and why we need them. Next slide. So why is the county fixing the roads? Well, it's to make the community more resilient to the flooding that is starting to occur now and is going to increase over time. We want to try to proactively address the drainage. We've had funds available that we have pursued to do that. So we're trying to grab the dollars while they've been available for some of the key projects that we've identified throughout the county. This will preserve the long-term access to homes, to provide drier roads and mitigate the flooding that we're seeing and we're going to continue to see, which is going to continue to maintain the desirability of the community. And the level of grant funding that we've secured so far, $84,568,221,000. And one thing that we do know is we've been lucky to secure that combination of federal and state funding so far, but it is probably not going to be available in the future. And as mentioned, you will have different points of time that you will be able to make decisions about how this project is progressing and the use and level of the funding that we have secured. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Juliana. She's going to talk about the design approach for this particular project and the assumptions that have been baked into it. And then I'll be back to talk to you a little bit more about the easements later in the presentation.
Thank you, Erin. So as Erin already discussed the impacts that sea level rise is having in your community, I'm going to talk about the solutions. To address sea level rise, the recommended solution consists of mainly two components. The first one is to elevate the roads to the minimum elevation of 2.26 NABD. That elevation comes from the 2045 water level projection that comes directly from the vulnerability study that Erin previously discussed. 19 roads were identified along Big Coppitt community as being vulnerable based on those 2045 projections. So now, as we raise the roads, we need to make sure that those elevated roads connect to your properties and that a gradual transition is provided at the driveway so that the access to your properties is maintained. This process of connecting from that elevated road to existing is called harmonization. When a project like this, we need to make sure when we design a project like this, we need to adhere to some regulations. One of them being the stormwater regulations from South Florida Water Management District. They require us that when we build a project like this, we need to manage stormwater collection to not cause adverse impacts to your community or to your properties. This is the reason why raising the roads alone is not sufficient. It must happen together with a new engineered drainage system. That is the second part of our solution, and it's basically installing a closed drainage system that collects rainfalls, mitigates king tides, and is going to be replacing the gravity infiltration system, which is not working. And that will also worsen with time. The drainage system includes a collection system with inlets and pipes, a pump station, and a backup generation with injection wells. This approach will provide a resilient and long-term solution for your community. Next slide. Now I'm going to go over the proposed design. What you see here, is a project layout. These are the roads, the 19 roads that are impacted as part of this project. This map has been color-coded based on elevation adjustments. What you see in red are basically where the difference in elevation between existing and that 2.26 elevation is greater than 1 foot. So these are the areas where you most likely see the most significant impacts. The orange is where the elevation adjustment varies between 0.5 foot to 1 foot. And then we have areas in yellow that currently might not be seeing severe impacts but as we talked about, these based on projections to 2045, they will most likely become green, orange, and then eventually red. Next slide. What you see here is a plan and profile. The top view is basically looking at your road from the top, and the bottom is the profile elevation. There's a key thing here on Riviera Drive, and is the right-of-way. So the right-of-way is the space that we have available to construct. We are able to maintain and to build all of our improvements within the right-of-way. But as I mentioned before, as we raise the road, this specific road is 8 inches, but there's areas that are way more significant than this. So as we raise the road and we connect to existing, some of that harmonization will be happening outside of the right-of-way and at the properties. And that is why we will need easements, which will later be covered in more detail. Next slide. This is a typical section. The typical section is basically a slice of the road. So what we're proposing is we're going to be providing 9-foot lanes. This is also based on design criteria. We're raising the road once again to the minimum elevation that I've discussed, 2.26. We're going to be installing valley gutters on both sides. That valley gutters is going to allow us to collect runoff within the right-of-way and direct it to inlets that are going to be placed along those valley gutters at low points on the road. The right-of-way, or the space that we have available on this specific road, is 30 feet. So as I previously mentioned, we're collecting everything within the right-of-way, but we need to harmonize or connect to the existing properties outside of that right-of-way. Next slide. Now, Greg is going to go over how that engineered stormwater system functions and some of the key elements and where they're going to be located throughout the project.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Juliana. As Juliana had mentioned up earlier in the regards to the design of the project, there's a 2-phase. So we raise the roadways, and then we have to collect and then treat the stormwater. So the rainfall that comes from the sky and ensure that that does not cause an adverse impact with the implementation of this project. It's not an either or type of implementation. We have to implement both the road raising, and then we have to look at the stormwater, because that is a regulated standard from South Florida Water Management District, which we'll get into in the next few slides. So here's a quick overview of the engineered stormwater system within your community. Those yellow lines are pipes. Don't get concerned. They're not above the ground. They're below the ground. There are a lot of locations throughout your community because they are the main thoroughway of routing the water into those pump stations. The 3 pump stations are located strategically within the community, and they're then distributed into injection wells that ultimately get rid of the water so that we can provide the level of service that's necessary and mandated by the South Florida Water Management District. If you go to the next slide, Whistler, we have a plan and profile of that same situation. So you see the road pipes that are going down the center of the right-of-way. Those are collecting the water and then going to bring those to the pump station. The thing I want to really highlight, and the thing we're wanting to talk about here tonight, is the easements. So you can see those blue property inlets that are shown there. Those property inlets are necessary based on the harmonization that Juliana was talking about with the roadways. So as we elevate the roadways, we sometimes have to go expanding beyond the footprint of the county's right-of-way. And therefore, in order to not cause an adverse impact of some of that flow that sometimes comes from those private properties, which is intended not to come to those roadways, which we'll talk about in the next slide, is that we have to capture it to ensure that we're not causing any adverse impacts or any additional flooding in your private properties. So if you go to the next slide, this is going to really harp on what I was just saying. And I know you're hearing that word adverse impacts over and over again. And I'm really wanting to impress that in regards to how we're evaluating this system for the Big Coppitt community. So the green line is showing you the existing elevation of the roadway that we have today. And as you can see on the left-hand side, some of that flow from those private properties is discharging or running off into that low point of the roadway. It should be noted that that is not something that should be done or should have been implemented. However, it is the condition that we're dealing with today. So South Florida Water Management District tells us that the conditions that we have today, we cannot cause an adverse impact tomorrow with the implementation of this project. So if you look at that blue line, that is our new elevated roadway. And so in order to ensure that we're not causing adverse impacts with some of that flow coming off of your private properties, we have to implement these drainage inlets in your property at specific locations based on elevations to ensure we're not causing adverse impacts. And if you go to the next slide, we're going to talk to you a little bit more about the specific regulations and how each of those specific components get pulled together. And the team will obviously interject if they have anything to say further on what I'm going to talk about here with you today. But when we start setting up the models, we develop a precondition model. That precondition model, as I mentioned, looks at all the different types of flow patterns that are happening today. Then we develop a post-condition model, what we're going to have in terms of implementing our proposed improvements. And then we verify both of those different aspects to ensure we're not causing any adverse impacts to those surrounding properties. So the short of it is the flooding that you're having today will still exist tomorrow, but it will not get worse as we start to implement this project. And I see Judy coming off of mute, so she's going to add something to it.
No, I was going to say, you know, as we talk about adverse impacts in sort of plain language, as Greg noted, there is some amount of stormwater we've noticed through the design and the modeling. We have our elevations that is coming from private property onto the roadway, which is now the low point. You know, the state and local stormwater regulations, private properties, their stormwater is supposed to be maintained on the property, but there are older parcels, there's historic flow that does go to the right of way. Now, when we raise that, that will create a barrier. And even though that stormwater is private property stormwater, it has been flowing onto the roadway. So we are required to manage it. The way we have to manage it now is outside of the right of way. And that's the reason why these inlets are needed outside of the right of way on private property. The inlets that we have within the right of way are managing the water from the roadway. So I wanted to make that clear, that it's not like that we designed a system that's too big for what we have. We specifically need them to be outside of the right of way because now it's too high for that water to historically flow onto it, but we still need to address it. So
Yeah,
that's the
perfect.
adverse impact that we are eliminating. We're going to keep managing that stormwater.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Judy. Thanks for adding that. And now that's a perfect segue. I'm going to turn it over to Erin, and she's going to talk to you about those specific easements and the details behind it.
So what is an easement? It's an agreement by the property owner that's going to allow the county to have permission to use a portion of their property for a limited defined purpose. And here it's for the installation of those drainage inlet structures that we've been describing. For this particular project on Big Coppitt, the county is going to use that area to install those stormwater outlets. Next slide. So we're going to kind of step through the elements of these easements. The first one, we've already talked about the legal agreement that has been sent to you in the package, so you can actually see what that language is, that the county is going to use the property. The property that is needed is either a 5x5 segment or a 5x10 segment for the installation of these drainage easements. We're going to talk a little bit about what those look like and where they're potentially located in subsequent slides. As we've already talked about, why do we need the easements? Because historically, some of the stormwater from the properties flowed onto the road. Once we elevate the road, that's not going to be able to occur anymore. The South Florida Water Management District, for their permits, requires us to compensate for that, to make sure that we've captured that water, and it's going to occur at the locations that I'll describe in a subsequent slide. But to secure that environmental resource permit, we need to be able to compensate for that drainage. Next slide. And so the benefits of the easement, well, quite frankly, without the easement, the project's not going to be completed. The road can't be elevated, and we can't deal with the current and the future flooding that we're going to see, and that's going to worsen over time. The private property owners providing the easements are going to receive some level of flood protection benefit that we talked about to compensate for that flow that was occurring onto the roadway that won't be able to occur anymore. So what rights would you have with the easement? Well, you would still own the land, but it can't interfere with the operation of that new stormwater drainage inlet that would be installed. So the uses in that easement area can't conflict with the operations of that drainage structure. Examples would be that you can't fence around it or you can't landscape around it, thus preventing the water from moving into that drainage structure and being managed by the overall system. Examples of what you can do in the easement area: you can still maintain the lawn, you can drive over these inlets, you can park on these inlets. So the drainage has to be constructed at the locations where the raised roadway is going to meet the existing ground elevation. At that point, that's where we kind of reverse where the potential flow would occur, and that's where we install the drainage structure to make sure that that flow can still be managed, because it won't be able to be managed on the road anymore. Next slide. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the team again to talk about the specific easements in the project and where they are located.
Yes. Hey, thanks, Erin. Good evening to the Big Coppitt community. So to get in more specific with the easements, here's an overall map again of the project area. But you can see highlighted by the color coding are those specific streets that have these easements that we've been talking about. So you can see here 9 streets And really, the takeaway from this slide is these right-of-ways are narrower than the rest of the project. We're talking about 30 or 35 feet and under and less, which is why the easement condition applies. And I'll get into that specifically. Next slide. So here pretty much a list version of the streets. Those 9 streets that I mentioned that have these easements. 9 roads to accommodate the harmonization that Juliana spoke about, where the water is now being trapped essentially when you elevate the roadway. One specific thing I want to mention, we say Avenue F, but it's specifically east of 4th Street. So keep that in mind. It's not all of Avenue F, and we'll get into the details of each street as well. So next slide, please. All right, so we have the drainage easements we call 5x5 easements, right? And when we harmonize based on where your elevation is and where we're raising to, if that elevation, the new change in elevation is 6 inches or less, you're going to have a 5x5 easement, 5 feet wide by 5 feet deep. And that is represented in the right image in that teal blue graphic. And you can see the drainage inlet sitting in black inside of that easement. On the left is a cross section, and in that cross section, you can see the right-of-way water flows back onto the roadway. But when we harmonize and that new elevated roadways is now, as I said, elevated, we have to collect that water represented in that blue column represented by easement. And you can see the inlet sitting on the back of that slope. So it's important to know we're putting it right at the edge of the right-of-way, and we've done our best fit to fit it at the edge of your properties and also the edge of the right-of-way, so it's least intrusive to your property. Next slide, please.
Hey, Parvesh, just real quick, I'd like to add something in regards to the slopes. I think a lot of people maybe see like the 1 to 4, right? What that actually means in what it kind of portrays in terms of Aaron's use of that easement area. So if you think of a 1 to 4, so that basically is a 1 foot vertical versus a 4 foot horizontal change in that slope. So that's what Aaron was talking about, where you can still access this area as a normal piece of your property, and it's not going to limit really the amount of use that you can have there. So I just wanted to make sure that that point was raised. So
yeah, no, very good point, Greg. And I'd even add to that, the 1 to 4 slope is the maximum slope. So that is the worst condition here is very usable. So in some cases, in many cases, perhaps we'll have even a shallower slope. All right. So moving on to the second condition with the easements is pretty much a 5x10 easement. So it's still 5 feet wide. The only difference with this easement, it's 10 feet deep. The only reason we have to do this is because that new elevation change in the proposed roadway is greater than 6 inches. So that essentially understand the higher we are elevating, we need some more space to harmonize back. And thus that extra depth we're showing with the 5x10 easement. Again, it's the same idea at the edge of the right-of-way, generally at the edge of your property. And the only difference, it's 5x10 easement. It's the same size of inlet as well. So it's important to know that it's just the easement depth is changed to accommodate that new, more increased elevations where needed. All right, so next slide, please. Here is pretty much if you notice, we've gone from a big, large view to helicopter view to really now down to the property level here. On the left side, you have an example of a 5x5 inlet. And it's important to note again, it's abutting the right-of-way line and generally at the edge of your property line on the sides of your property. So you can see a good graphic image of what that inlet would look like sitting inside of that 5x5 easements that we need, that we're requesting, which is associated with the documents you've gotten in your mail. Similarly, on the right side, we have the 5x10 easement, and you can see that inlet is just sitting deeper from that right-of-way line, but still within that easement. Of course, the piping that connects to that inlet also is within that easement. So that's the name of the game. When you have the higher elevation, you have this 5x10 easement represented in the right. I think of much interest to many of you is actually what a real-time, a realistic image of these inlets would look like. And an example is shown on the top right here of what those inlets can look like. All right, so next slide, please. Well, I'll pass it on now back to the team for what's next.
Thank you. So you've heard quite a bit of information tonight. You've heard all about the easements requirements, and we need to get them in by May, and then how the property is under design. So this is kind of just a little bit of a wrap up here. So we're going to be trying here in the next few days and week here to try to get the property owner's signatures on those easement documents by May 1st or shortly thereafter. Then what we're going to do is that allows us to complete the 100% design plans and permit applications. We're going to take that set of plans, submit them to the permitting agencies, which includes the Water Management District, Department of Environmental Protection, and then the Federal Army Corps. And then we're also going to take that same set of plans and submit them to our granting agencies. Those are the ones who are providing us those funds. And that's Department of Emergency Management at the state level and FEMA at the federal level. Then those two work together, Department of Emergency Management and FEMA, and they do what is known as a benefit cost analysis. And that's a fairly complicated procedure, but they have, excuse me, they have a formula they use where they look at the overall cost, which in this case is estimated at 84 million, and they look at the types of benefits that the project is providing, and they do this analysis. Now that can take anywhere, we don't know exactly, but typically it takes anywhere from like 2 to 6 months or maybe a little bit more since this is a large project. So that's what we're doing. And so if it passed that benefit cost analysis, that's when we're able to go ahead and dip into those $84.5 million in grant funds that are currently set aside. So we do have the grant funds, but we haven't received approval to spend them on the construction yet because they need to complete that benefit cost analysis. And then once we get to that point, let's assume we do, then we can go ahead and advertise for bids and open them up. Now, since it could take anywhere from 2 to 6 months or more, probably, and we don't submit all this until May, it may be actually the beginning of 2027, the beginning of next year, where we might hear from them. And so once we do, we can go ahead and issue the bid solicitation, and then we come back to you and let you know, here's the actual cost. So we're going to know for sure then whether that $84.5 million we already have will cover the entire construction costs. And if it doesn't, we'll have to talk, because then there might be, we would have to tell you what the differential would be, because at this time the residents would be anticipated to go ahead and fund that differential in capital. And then we come to you for a vote. And this is where you heard Christine mention it earlier, and also the mayor. This is really where you control your future for this neighborhood and this project. It'll be a formal process. We haven't yet completed or formalized the ordinance that goes over this. That's probably going to go to our May commission meeting, we think. And so everyone will work that process out later at a future meeting, but this is really how it's going to work. Now, if the residents vote no at that time, the project does not go forward, and those $84 million in grant funds will be returned to the state and to the federal government, FEMA. We're not allowed to hang on to them. We can't, try to use them for different projects, so they would be returned. And if you vote yes, then the county would move forward with the construction contracts. We'd use our own money to pay for it, and then complete it. And if there's any differential in the capital cost, we would set up an assessment. There's also going to be a separate assessment needed for the operations and maintenance, which we will get into in a future meeting in very great detail. We didn't want to have too many details tonight on assessments, because this really is about easements.
And Rhonda, if I could interrupt, I want to make it clear to the residents, saying yes and signing the easement does not mean you are automatically voting yes on the project. You can agree to provide an easement, and if the project does go forward to construction, we would then use that easement. However, you can agree to provide the easement, but as it moves along through the process and we have the future meetings and maybe the cost is higher, or you feel you don't want the project to move forward, you can vote no when we have that vote. providing the easement to us does not mean you are giving us a yes vote on the project. It's simply you are agreeing that if the project does move forward, then you would grant us the easement. I would also mention that we need the easements for our submittal, but we will not record them unless the project moves forward to construction. So if it doesn't move forward, we won't have an easement on your property. I just wanted to make that clear as well.
Very important. Okay, I believe that wraps up our presentation. At this point, we're going to open it up for questions, and I think, Jathan, you have a little bit of, tell them how to raise their hands.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
For all virtual attendees, if you wish to give public input, please use the raised hand feature. So far, I have 2 raised hands. The first speaker is Steve Allerton. Steve, please unmute your microphone.
Hello, my name is Steve Allerton. I live at 13 Delmar Boulevard. I've lived there about 25, maybe 30 years. Seen a lot of flooding. Nothing that was insurmountable. One question I'm wondering about the easement. Suppose I'm dead against this project for a variety of reasons, but if I were not to grant an easement, does that hijack the whole project? It would seem pretty inefficient if that was the case, but that would be my stance. I have other questions to get into, but let me leave it at that for now.
Okay. I will start with that, and Greg, feel free to jump in. We do need the easements in order to receive the permit for the stormwater system from South Florida Water Management District. The design has been submitted to the permit agencies. We'll need the easements in order to have the permit issued. One easement not being received, I don't know that derails the entire project, but if we don't get them, we will not be able to have the project move forward. Greg, I don't know if there's anything to that with more experience in the permitting.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. We'll definitely need those easements, but they'll have to be evaluations if it's one, right? 1 out of 57 that we don't get, we have to come up with maybe a strategic approach there to continue to move forward with the project and maybe come up with another solution. But
and I would say, that would be a negotiation with the Water Management District.
Right.
We can't come up with, plan B, C, D. We need a complete system. And as we had said, these inlets outside of the roadway are addressing the flow from the private property to prevent us from creating a worse condition. So that is part of the system now. So
can I ask another question?
Certainly.
My girlfriend.
Okay, yeah. Hi, I'm Jane Parthmore. I'm his girlfriend, and I have some questions. You've already answered about the question that he said about the easement. What if he grants an easement and the project does not go forward? What happens to that easement? Because we're concerned about property values that have easements on them, and is this easement going to remain on this property forever, regardless of whether the project is actually
no. And that's what I try to. When you grant an easement, it then needs to be recorded with the clerk's office. So if the project does not move forward, we will not record them with the clerk.
Okay, that's good to know.
We need them to be able to show to the permitting agencies and we can build this project. We have the easements that we need. But if we end up not moving forward, we will not take that step and record them.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions that are more related to the engineering of it. The easement, I don't know, I think there's only one on his side of the road on Delmar Boulevard. And because it's not a roadway that has a gutter system, like the ones that have the larger right of ways. Now, I guess I didn't understand this at the meeting back in February, but this collection, what it's called a inlet structure on his property, is basically going to be where water is flowing into the underground collections area piping.
Yes.
So you seem to be mentioning that all this water that seems to be coming in the current state is coming from people's properties into the roadway. But when you raise the road bed, now there's going to be a significant amount of water coming from the road bed on into the drainage system. It isn't just all his property, him containing his own water now. But my larger concern is what happens if he's the only one on that street. I'm just picturing a scenario where all this water in I don't know if a big rain event or a king tide or whatever is all going to be draining from all of the properties on his street into his inlet collection system, which means, I mean, everybody else is going to have all of their water drained off their property. But it seems to me that on his particular property, because of this inlet structure, that all the water is going to be rushing onto his yard, just like water rushing into the drain of a bathtub. So, and I'm not quite sure how the engineering of how all this works.
Greg, I'll let you field this. I will point out that we have inlets within the roadway, and that will collect all of the stormwater in the roadway. So there will be no water flowing from the roadway onto private property. But Greg can explain the placement of the inlets and.
Yeah, that's right. And the rest of the team can also interject. But as you mentioned, Judy, as we raise the road, we're going to capture so we're not discharging more water to your property. As I had mentioned before, the strategic location of these inlets are placed so to provide non-adverse impacts to your property. So we're collecting that water that was, as we mentioned, some of it discharging to the low point of the roadway today, which really should have been contained already. But now we're having to show it as a non-adverse impact with this project because it is changing what current conditions are. So as we strategically put these inlets, we're not pushing more water to any specific private property. We're just collecting some of that flow that would have discharged out from your property into the roadway now in these inlets, so we don't cause any sort of adverse impacts on your property.
And Greg, the inlets on the private property, they are at the low point along the roadway. Is that an accurate statement? So
yes,
will flow there.
Relative to other
right.
property owners on the same side of the street, but it still seems like there's going to be this net flow. Maybe the road will apparently has its own inlet structures that will contain roadway water, but it still seems like there's going to be a net flow of water from other people's properties onto the property that has the inlet structure easement.
Yeah, I'd like to feel that a bit, Judy.
Yes.
So what happens is, yes, the inlets are placed in a strategic location at the existing low point based on the topography, right? That whole surface is very permeable in general. So the quantity of water that actually is at that point in the property, it's very limited. Again, I want to clarify, none of the right-of-way water makes it to your property. It's all trapped within. So what you will have is any type of ponding, water is, follows the least path of resistance. Any type of ponding that may occur will be very, very short-lived because it will flow to that inlet and the relief will be much faster than any condition you currently have. So I would assure you, I would not worry about if a couple of properties are stringed together to feed to one inlet causing an issue. It certainly will not. In fact, your drainage condition is far more improved.
And you pretty much are guaranteeing that will be the case.
Yes, and the modeling and the engineering behind it is based on this simplicity. The tributary area, the surface area that those private property inlets take care of, it's very little. That small little path that we harmonize back is what it's primarily for. That space and surface is already very pervious. A lot of the water will drain, but when there is significant stormwater, let's say a high intensity event, those inlets will work very effectively to manage that, in simple terms, that little bit of quantity of water in that specific corridor, not in the right of way.
Okay, well, I mean, if it's that insignificant, why do we even need to have an easement?
Just to clarify that
Yeah.
condition that Parvesh is talking about with infiltration is happening today. But as we talked about, as the sea level rise increases, as your king tides come up, the ability for that water now to infiltrate as it has done in the past becomes non-existent. So therefore, now we are adding this closed stormwater system with these inlets so that captures that runoff and that water, and then it routes it to that pump station and gets rid of that water through the injection well system to provide the level of service. So I know Judy's going to say something.
I was going to say, and keep in mind, I heard, why are we doing it? And we are required by the permitting agency to collect it to ensure that we do not create an adverse condition. So that's why we're doing it. It may not be much, but it's something, and we are required to manage it. And so manage it we will, but we need your help with an easement.
Okay. Good to know. The other question I have about the engineering of it, we're talking about raising the road, I think, by 2.2 feet in this case, and it's a narrow right-of-way road. So we've got a maximum 1 to 4 slope to get down to grade, and in the case of a 5 by 5 foot easement, is the road bed supposed to be down to grade by the time it reaches the property line?
Correct. And that's what that harmonization is. And the 2.26 is an elevation, but some of these roads are not at elevation 0. So you're not going to see a 2-foot increase. You're going to see less
okay.
than that.
Okay, so there's not, I mean, because I'm picturing in order to have a gentle slope from the middle of the road and have it reach grade by the time it gets to the property line on these narrow right-of-ways, it just means like there's hardly going to be any road left to drive your car on.
Yeah.
Correct. No, the 2.26 is an elevation, a target elevation. That
Okay,
was
is that the NAVD elevation?
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that area that you're looking at is, if you go back a few slides, Wizzle, you can see there the elevation difference that we're raising it, which is, only like a half a foot at the max in the area that you're referring to.
But for someone that did require a 5 by 10 easement, it sounds to me like the road, the slope won't be all the way down to grade before it gets to the property line. Now that's why you need the extra 5 feet.
That's right.
Correct.
So someone, I mean, not in his situation, but there are some 5 by 10 easements. Somebody, excuse me, might end up having a slope on inside their property.
Yes, there will be a slight slope. That's the harmonization that Juliana spoke about.
So that just for someone else's edification. Thank you very much for answering those questions.
I have one more, having to do with adverse conditions. You have to, as things stand now, or if we turn down this project at the voters booth, things will go on as they have for the past, with virtually few problems. It should be pointed out that even if this is built successfully, it's not going to affect hurricane heights or king tide heights. Anytime the tide comes higher than the land, it's still going to flood, and the system is not going to do anything to ameliorate that situation. But you talk about the adverse conditions that gets triggered when any work is done to the road, any kind of elevation. Even if you elevate the road an inch, you're triggering this adverse conditions clause, which requires you to treat any water that runs off of the road, where now we're getting a pass on that, and it retreats gently back into the ocean as it has for thousands of years. But because we've triggered this bureaucratic adverse conditions clause. We have to build this infrastructure to treat the water, have crews, have people on payroll, ready and waiting for, one of these very infrequent events to occur at great expense. And I know it hasn't come up yet, but you're going to talk about assessments and figures that I've heard up to $150 a month, dues basically for the privilege of living there, where, in my opinion, very little problem exists. I'll stop there.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, and keep in mind the drainage system, the engineered system that we're proposing to install, it isn't just because we have to meet the stormwater permitting requirements. As Aaron had discussed earlier on, we're losing the ability to drain by gravity with the sea level rise that we're seeing, and that is projected to continue. So, the solution to that is to have a drainage system that does not rely on gravity. So that is, the main reason why we're proposing an engineered system. And, that's duly noted. Duly noted if you feel that it is more than we needed, but thank you.
Yeah, Judy, I'd like to add one piece there specifically. I think it's important for everyone to just understand clearly that the system is not just for today. So while some of you may feel like it's describing that there are little impacts, little flooding, the system is designed to accommodate that impact that Judy's talking about, 5, 10, 15, the sea level rise impact. So it's important to take account of that, not just the short-term vision of today only, and it's not going to solve, we can deal with what happens today for some people. It really has a much long-term capability, much more longer-term capability, I should say.
And I would like to add as well that part of the having a system like this with pipes and a pump station, having an inlet. Right now there is no inlet. So having an inlet when you have a king tide or extreme high tides, the pump is not going to pump all that water, but when the water recedes, that inlet is going to take the water faster from the properties. While right now you would have to wait for hours or days, and that is not going to be capable of doing. With this drainage system, that is a great improvement, I would say, because the duration of the flooding will be minimized to the minimum.
Okay. All right. Jathan, next question.
Speaker is Jody Moore. Jody, please unmute your microphone. Actually, looks like you're calling via. Thank you.
Hi. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So my name is Jody. I live on Riviera Drive. I have several questions, but I thank Steve's girlfriend for asking some of the same ones I had. I'm going to keep them to easement specific. My first question is, we are one of the properties, actually we own 2 properties, and we got the easement request for both properties here. They're side by side. But my understanding is you're choosing these easements based on the lowest point of the street. My yard does not flood. The street at my yard does not flood. It seems like the flooding we've seen here happens back down the street, closer to the water, where there is, in fact, my understanding is a county-owned lot back there. So I don't understand why you wouldn't put the easement on the county lot, saving you the request of a property owner and placing it where historically the road floods more than outside my house.
Yeah, sure. I'll start with that. When you decide to place these, when we decide to place these inlets, it's really based on a locality type of review. It's not, it's not look at the whole street, find the lowest point and put it. Again, when we do the survey, we have the elevation points, we have LiDAR data. We look at the overall idea of what's happening with the topographic nature of it. So you may have a condition at the end of the street. Do we want all the water flowing down to one side end of the street? There are a lot of engineering principles like time of concentration to get to an inlet, for instance. So again, we found the best, most efficient way for the water to get into that closed system. And this is what is being presented today.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is, you mentioned that you had asked for 57 easements. Is there, I understand if you're missing one, you may be able to make changes and reconfigure it, but is there a firm number that you guys know you need? Oh, of those 57, we need X amount in order to continue.
No, as Parvesh just said, we've designed a system that needs these elements. So it's been submitted to the permitting agencies, and we haven't asked for 57, hoping we get 30 because that's the cutoff. We have designed a system, and we need these easements and inlets in these locations to manage the water that we have calculated through the design process. So no,
Right. So if you asked for 57, then you essentially need like 56. You need pretty much essentially all of them in order to continue.
We need to be able to, present a complete system to the permitting agencies. We can't do that in the absence of these easements.
And Jody, I'd add one piece that when we presented in February, again, this is a progressive design as it incrementally improves, right? We're getting closer to the end. I believe in February, we were at about 70 plus easements, but improvements in the roadway profile and that change in elevation, optimizing the design has gotten us closer to that most elemental level. We've reduced it really much to the basic amount, and this is where we are with the 57.
Thank you. That's a good point, Parvesh. I know we've been working on it.
Sure.
Yes. And however this ends up, I want to thank you all for all your time and hard work. I know it's a lot. So do you anticipate it further reducing from 70 to 57 to even less?
Given the circumstances we have, I do not foresee that. Some of the changes have been, corner properties, reduce it from 2 to 1, but no, we've really, really gotten into the resolution of the design where we're tweaking, not inches, that's micro inches or whatever refinement you want to call it, to get the optimum elevation. So we've pretty much gotten to, we're 90 to 100% close to that, and we've locked in pretty much where we are with that. So we feel very confident about the placement and the frequency of these easements at this point.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Jathan.
Next speaker is Tammy Brannon. Tammy, please unmute your microphone.
We're gonna pass.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker is Susan Seward. Susan, please unmute your microphone.
Okay. I had a question. Our property is at 21 Ventana Lane, and am I to understand that we should have gotten a packet including this easement document? And if so, I have not received that.
Okay. If you did not receive that, it's because we don't need an easement from you.
Okay. That answers my question. So we're not a part of this, or?
We do not need an easement from you, no.
Okay, so we won't be voting or having any input in this.
No, that Ventana is in the project, but it's just, there isn't an easement that's needed.
Okay, but it may be elevated. Ventana may be elevated.
Ventana does not need to be elevated. That was one of the roads that was high enough that it does not.
Okay, very good. Well, I thank you for that information. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Keith Moore. Keith Moore, please unmute your microphone. Keith, I see that you're unmuted.
Yeah, is it working now?
Yes, it is.
Okay, sorry, it said unmuted, but so I appreciate my wife asking some questions earlier, but I do have a couple additional. So obviously we're not in the room together, but I'm looking at. I was there for the original meeting, and I hear what you're saying about sea elevation rise, water rising, etc. And I've seen all the tables and the global impacts of raising 6 feet, 6 inches to a foot by 2045, etc. It doesn't appear to me, we're looking at raising the road 6 inches to 8 inches. I don't understand how that change is protecting us. We're talking about, what is it, $45 million or $60 million for something that doesn't look like it's going to be much help. We're going to be in the same boat we are in, what do you call it, in 15 years from now. So that's number one. And then I guess my second question, we can answer them both together. I could drop off, whatever, is I two things concern me about having the easement on my lots. Number one is I keep hearing about if there's a failure or potential of failure, whatever the case is, and I just see that as my wife pointed out, we've never had any flooding on our lot during king tide. We've never had enough flooding on our lot, regardless of how bad the rain's gotten. And I know it's a very selfish perspective, but now we're re-diverting the water to be absorbed by my lot. And that means if there's a problem with this system, I'm now going to flood where I've never flooded before. So the second concern with that is when I sat in the meeting, I heard a commentary on, well, if you guys decide to stop paying for this in 5 years from now, then we just stop maintaining it and blah, blah, blah. And if it goes to crap, it goes to crap, and that's the end of it. Well, if, they decide, if there is a decision to stop maintaining this after X number of years because it's so expensive, now I'm in the previous boat of, you've now re-diverted all this water onto my property where I've never had flooding before. So, is there any consideration for that where we are impacting properties that have never been impacted in the past? And I guess with that, I'll mute myself again.
Okay, I will start. I'll start with your last question or statement. A decision to stop maintaining that. If we construct the system, part of the permitting requirements is that the county needs to certify that they will maintain the system and continue to maintain it. So that we can't just decide to do that. That will be a certification that the county has to give to South Florida Water Management District. That is the state agency responsible for permitting. We need to sign a certification that we will maintain it and that we have the financial capability to do so. So that is, we won't decide 5 years from now. We're just not going to do it. We don't have that option. With respect to flooding where we never had it before, we will be raising the roads, and as we said, there might be some water from private property that used to flow onto the roadway, and we need to manage that. But we aren't diverting water that does not flow to your property now to your property. So we aren't increasing flow other than that which comes from private property that used to flow onto the roadway. So I'm not sure I understand, and maybe Greg or Parvesh, that there isn't an increase in flow to your property.
So let me explain. I'm at 21 Riviera. I've seen as far down as 4 or 5 houses down. It's flooded. Mine isn't. But now if we build up that road and then the water in a failure has nowhere to go, it's going to run through to my property. And that's fine. I get it. But with the pumps working, there's no issue. But when that pump fails, now that water builds up in the low spot.
Julie, may I take a shot a little bit
Yeah.
at probably one of the concerns, because I know I heard the word failure in the system, and it's a good point. But I just wanted to mention that the system is built with redundancy. We are putting the pump stations are interconnected. We have 3 pump stations that are interconnected. So say, for example, one pump station would fail for one reason or the other 2 pump stations would pick up. In addition, which is really a great investment in this particular case, in my opinion, is that if the power goes off, we do have alternate power, which we're putting standby generators that will pick up that energy that is required to run the pumps. So in reality, it is very, there could be failures, but we have built reliability on the system. And I hope that answers one of your concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Luz.
Yeah, and I can take the last piece of that. The last question, the first question you had was about raising 6 inches and the impact of that, what you may perceive as minimal elevation. So first of all, elevation is variable throughout the project. Yes, we highlight numbers and show graphics, but in the same street, you can have variable increases. The point is the new roadway geometry, whether you have 2 inches elevated or 8 inches elevated, we are channeling a lot of water geometrically, longitudinally along the roadway and also cross slope into the gutter. So that geometry is going to make trapping water on the right of way extremely much more efficient than what the existing conditions are. So I won't get too bogged down with the representation of a single number, because the implications of raising in addition to the environment around it has a tremendous value in terms of managing water on that right of way.
Okay.
Next speaker is Eddie Curtis. Eddie, please unmute your microphone.
Sorry, I was just I have the screen sharing now, so we can kind of look at properties and kind of give a visualization of what people are asking for, and so we can kind of start showing you where those easements will be, strategically placed so as to not cause that adverse impact as what was mentioned earlier. So I'll move to the next address as people raise their hand.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
So this is Eddie Curtis. I'm a retired senior commander from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, so I have lots of experience with large civil projects like this and public easements. My question is, if you receive a high number of easements, 90%, 80%, will you pursue condemnation to guarantee the rest of the easements?
No, that is something that the board said that they are not willing to pursue. We will not do that. That's a very good question, and thank you for asking it.
If I can follow up, because I missed the first half, so I apologize if this is redundant. Looking at the map now, would the annual assessment only go to the homes that are colored, or would it be everybody on Big Coppitt?
No, it will be everyone within the project area.
Got it. Okay.
This area that you see, and as Rhonda had mentioned, we'll have future meetings on that to discuss how that's developed. There's a whole process, and that gets discussed. And we, at the earlier meeting, we did touch on it, and but it's a fairly involved process. So we will have future meetings, but it won't be all of Big Coppitt areas that are outside of the project area. It will be the beneficiaries of the project.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
Next speaker is Dale Thomas. Dale Thomas, please unmute your microphone. Dale Thomas, you have your hand raised. Yes, you're unmuted now, Dale Thomas. All right, we're going to go to the next speaker. Looks like he's having an issue. Next speaker is Charles and Rebecca White. Please unmute your microphone.
Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're in. I'm currently serving in Poland. My wife's serving in Virginia, so I apologize for like any time delay that we've had on the video so far. Had a couple of questions right off the bat. We're on the south side of Riviera at 10 Riviera. Communication has been poor. We're temporarily renting our property to a Coast Guard family. But we've not been getting good communication about this project other than through Facebook. So I apologize in advance for asking this, but how can we better receive communications about this? And then on the biggest concern that I have on the operations and maintenance side of the house, what proof of concept, what do we have? What guarantees do we have about long-term costs with where the grant is not paying for the protection of the community, the operation of the pumps, the maintenance of the pumps, the operation of the whole thing in general?
I can start with the communication. And yes, we have been trying through all of our meetings to gather contact information for everyone. As we began, we had our first meeting in February. We publicized it as much as possible. We had it in the newspaper, social media. We put signs out in the neighborhood, which obviously doesn't help you. I understand that you are not local at this point. But as people signed in tonight, we asked for email addresses. We're developing, a database so that we can continue to communicate in better ways. So that will improve because we agree we don't have everyone's addresses we do have addresses, but not everyone is at those addresses, and we didn't have contact information. So we've been continually gathering that throughout the project, and we'll continue to do so. And then with respect to the long-term costs, we do calculate those. As I said, it's a process. Rhonda, you've done this. You can jump in if you'd like. You've done it on some. And we will be, it will be the O&M costs over the life of the project. And costs do go up. As we develop the assessment, we do it on a 5-year. We have to come back every year, but we try to average it over 5 years. We look at the estimated costs, and then we keep track of it. The intent is not to make money. That's only for the O&M for this system. So if costs are less, the assessment decreases.
Judy, can we put a link in with our website so that Mr. White can go to our website and be able to be updated immediately on any information?
Yes.
And then if he could send one of us his contact information, his email, so that we can put him in our list.
Sure. I believe
they have our contact information, right?
I've
They have our
enabled
contact information, correct?
the chat.
Okay.
Thank you so much for the response on that. I think there definitely could be better communication across the board. Unfortunately, this project, I've had to rely on neighborhood Facebook pages to find out when these meetings are occurring and do the best that I can to match communication for these video teleconferences while overseas. So any assistance with that, I would greatly appreciate, and my family would greatly appreciate.
Charles, when you get a chance, if you can enter your email address into the chat. Thank you. And final speaker is Jody Moore. Jody, please unmute your microphone.
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm back. Follow-up question for Judy. I was not going to ask about the assessments, but it was something you mentioned in replying to one of my husband's questions about the future assessments regarding future maintenance and functionality of this system as a whole. After that first meeting, we had spoken with Michelle afterwards and kind of asked her, you know, my biggest concern is sort of the unknown variable of the future assessments. I understand how and why the numbers may change based on the needs and maintenance overall of this system. When we raised that with Michelle, she had said, well, if at a future point you guys as a neighborhood decide that, you know, the monthly cost is out of control and you don't want to manage it anymore, you just simply vote that and then it becomes defunct and the system is no longer maintained. But that seemed to kind of go against, Judy, what you had answered to my husband earlier when he asked that, as far as you said, it will always be maintained. So I guess it kind of links back to, is that a possibility? Will it always be maintained, even if we as a community vote to stop paying that monthly assessment fee? How does that work in the future?
Well, like I said, we do need to certify that we will operate and maintain the system. I would have to check what provisions there are with the permitting agencies, you know, if for some reason we couldn't. It's not as simple as saying we don't want it anymore, because of course we have elevated the roads and created this condition. So I do not know under what conditions we could stop. So I can certainly research that and let you know.
Thank you.
Judy, if you like, I can give Dale Thomas another chance.
Sure.
Dale Thomas, you had your hand raised earlier. If you'd like to give input, please unmute your microphone. Dale Thomas. All right, Dale, you've unmuted your microphone. Can you give a test, please? Your input is important. Let me see if I can walk you through. On the bottom left-hand corner of the Zoom application, you will see a microphone icon and an upwards pointing arrow. If you choose that upwards pointing arrow, you will see your choice of microphone. If you have a different microphone, choose that, and it may allow your audio to go through. I'm sorry, Judy. This individual is still having technical issues.
Okay, well, I am in the chat right now, and I will put my email address in so that if people with technical issues have questions, they can email me. I'm also in the on the county website, so you can reach me there as well. And then right now, I'm doing my best to type in the website for the project. Mayor Lincoln, you don't know me well enough to know I'm not the best technical person, but I'm doing it right now.
The Keys Roads one, Judy?
This is the webpage for the Big Coppitt project.
Oh, I can get that for you.
There we go. We've done that as well. It's a webpage on our county website. We have information about the project, and we will also post future meetings there as well. We definitely want to hear from people. Like I said, we're here. Email us anytime with any questions. We want people to know as much as they need to about the project. So we thank you all. for coming tonight.
Does the mayor want to say a few words?
Yeah. Do you want to close, Mayor?
Okay, I feel like I'm at a county commission meeting and I need my gavel to end the meeting. I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank all of our residents who've been here. These have been some really good questions. I've written down a lot of notes. I'm probably afterwards going to have a few more questions on my own that I'm going to reach out to staff and get some more answers on. And this is like baking a cake, and we're halfway through just throwing all the ingredients on the counter for what we're going to put in the cake. And you all are the ones who get to pull it out of the oven. It's up to you all whether we're going to have a cake or not. But I want to now take a moment to thank our staff because several years ago, when streets started flooding and communities were coming to us and saying, what are you all going to do to help us with these streets that are flooding from king tides, and how are you all going to help us as sea levels are rising? Our staff started being really creative, and also at that same time, the state government started saying, look, we're going to put money into resiliency projects. And our county was able to fill out the grant work and the paperwork and apply for these grants and have these opportunities to have crazy amounts of money, 84 million for this project. I don't know off the top of my head how much for the Twin Lakes project, which is under construction right now. This money isn't always going to be here, but again, it's up to you all. You all in your community, you all have to figure out if you're comfortable with this. And there aren't any dumb questions. So if you all still don't really feel comfortable with the answer and don't want to ask the question in front of a room full of people, I get it. I'm going to ask my dumb questions later when it's just me. And my staff, this staff is here for you. So please, please feel free to email them or call them and say, I really need you all to sit down with me and answer my questions because I want you all to feel comfortable with this. So with that, thank you all for being here this evening. And again, thank you to this incredible team of engineers and attorneys and directors who are so intelligent and understand this much better than I ever will. So thank you, everyone, and have a great Earth Day night.
Thank you, Mayor. Good night, everyone.